Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I'm going to answer 10 random bookish questions. I'm doing the off the top of your head book tag. So this tag was created by the Library Mouse, and I was tagging it by MJ from the channel Reading This Life, so thank you very much to both of those. It's been around for a while, I think, this tag, so I'm probably not going to tag any people at the end because I think quite a lot of people have done it, all been tagged already. But anyway, let me go through the 10 questions. So this is 10 kind of random bookish questions, all of which quite fun. So first question then is, what was your favourite picture book as a child? So I was casting my mind back, and this was my favourite book before I can even remember being into books, if you see what I mean. So I remember when I was a bit older as a kid, this very battered copy of this book, being in existence in the house. And I know from my parents having talked to me about it that when I was like far too young to read and just loved, having this book and looking through the pictures in this book, that it was my favourite. And that book is Cars and Trucks and Things That Go by Richard Scarry, who I think is, for people of my age, often a favourite first author. So yeah, I can remember looking at the book when I was older and like having memories of certain pictures from the book that were obviously, from when I was really, really tiny. So yeah, that's my answer for that one. Next question then, what series did you love as a child? So I did talk a bit about this there was a similar question in the Old School April tag that I did recently, which talked about what books got you into reading. So definitely two of my favourite series as a kid were the Doctor Who series of books, and also the Swallows and Amazons series of books. But the one I thought I'd talk about today, because I talked about those ones last week or the other week, was the Fighting Fantasy series of books. So I really got into these when I was kind of 10 or 11, I suppose, that kind of age, I think was when they first came out. So like the Choose Your Own Adventure books that were popular in the States, Fighting Fantasy was, a series of books where you controlled where the story went. The thing I liked more about them than the Choose Your Own Adventure books is you had to roll dice to have battles and things like that. So it was kind of like a solo role-playing game within a book, and that really appealed to me. So I remember when these books first came out, and I bought up to about book 20, 25 probably. I think I had all of them. I really enjoyed them. We played them multiple times. My copies of them got quite battered as a result. You had like a character sheet at the start where you had to you would roll a dice to see I think it was skill, stamina and luck were the three attributes. So from me playing through the book multiple times, you'd have those numbers rubbed out and the pages kind of worn thin from me writing on them and then erasing again. So yeah, the Final Fantasy series of books by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson, just fantastic. Okay, question 3 then. The worst book you've read or tried to read. So I think for this one, and I was trying to think, I've read some pretty terrible books, but often terrible books can be really enjoyable. The author who consistently sucks me in by putting out books that look like they might be quite fun and then completely fails to deliver on that is James Patterson. So I've made a video about James Patterson in the past. I really do think he's a bit of a blight on the face of publishing, and these endless books he churns out with other authors where James Patterson is on the cover, I think are frequently just dreadful. The one that particularly comes to mind is his kind of reinvention of the Shadow, and apologies, I can't even remember who the co-author was on that one. But I really did think that was terrible. The Shadow is a really interesting character from, back in the day. Was originally in kind of pulp magazines. There was a radio show. There was a kind of, not quite modern anymore, but there was a reboot of the Shadow by DC Comics in the kind of 80s, which I really enjoyed. Written by Howard Chaykin. But yeah, this new novel of the Shadow took the basics of the concept of the Shadow and completely messed it up, made it into a kind of boring sci-fi YA book that really had nothing to do with the original Shadow at all. So yeah, James Patterson's The Shadow is my pick for that. Okay, next question then, your favourite reading or book memory. So this is going way back. I don't know how old I was when I read this book. I think I was probably kind of 13 or that kind of age. I think I read it after I'd started reading Stephen King, and I started reading King when I was kind of 12 or 13. So the book is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. So I remember buying this book and taking it home and reading it straight away. So a kid I went to school with, his dad ran a small second-hand bookshop in the town I grew up in. And I still remember it really clear. It was a tiny little place, but they used to have like tables out the front with all the books on. And I found this copy of The Wasp Factory and read all the blurbs on it. And I'd never heard of it, never heard of Ian Banks. I think he'd probably published 2 or 3 books at this point. But I wasn't someone who was reading like the literary pages of the newspapers or anything like that. But it just sounded like a fun, horrible book. So I bought it and took it home and read it straight away. Read it in that weekend. So I think I bought it on the Saturday morning and I'd finished it by the Sunday evening. And it just blew my mind. It was just so completely different from anything else I'd ever read, and felt like a book that was kind of literary, but was also just horrible and fun and funny as well, funny and grim and dark, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that's a kind of quite a powerful memory for me in my reading life of a book that changed my perspective to an extent on books and reading. Okay, next question then. A book you loved as a movie. So I was trying to think, the thing we tell ourselves as book lovers is that the book is always better, isn't it? And that's not the case. The book is often better, but there are some great movies that are based on books where the movie is better than the book. And I guess the one that I come back to is Die Hard. So Die Hard, based on a book by an author called Roderick Thorpe called Nothing Lasts Forever. And the movie of Die Hard is very similar to the book. Some of the scenes are like exactly the same as they are in the book. But the movie puts a completely different, there's a different heart to the movie. The movie has a heart in the way that the book doesn't. The book is quite a bitter book. So in the book, the central character, John McClane, is older. He's like towards the end of his career as a cop. He's kind of in his 40s or 50s, I think. And it's his daughter rather than his wife who's being held hostage in the tower. And all the terrorists, as they are in the movie by and large, are like younger people, kind of in their kind of 20s and 30s. And there's this terrible bitterness in McClane. He just hates all these young people who are doing bad things, but he hates them partly just because they're young. And it's just really misanthropic, the whole book. I mean, it's still really fun and gripping and enjoyable. But the movie, in I suppose a typical Hollywood fashion, weaves in that kind of family side to it as well, and the Christmas element too, and makes it kind of heartwarming in a way. And the book, as a result, feels, I think, massively inferior to the movie, despite being in many ways quite similar. Okay, next question then. A book you wish they would make into a movie. So for me, this is a series of books, and one that I really loved as a kid, and that's the Belgariad series by David Eddings. So subsequently, I've learned terrible things about David Eddings as a person, which have kind of spoiled my love of the books to an extent. But I would still, it was such an important reading experience for me growing up. The first time I'd read like an adult series of fancy books, there are like 5 books in the series, and they felt like quite an undertaking. And I was reading them as they were published. So I think the first 2 or 3 probably had come out when I started reading them, but I remember like waiting for the new ones to come out and waiting for them to come out in paperback so I could afford them, and that being a really memorable, powerful experience for me. And like the characters in the book are great, and the series of books are great. So it's a kind of typical quest thing where this young guy at the start of the book or start of the series gets, he's living a normal life in this kind of fancy world, and he gets pulled out of it and taken on this quest with all these weird people that he kind of vaguely knows, and he learns, typically he learns things about his past and things like that mean he's more important than he appears to be. So just a very engaging kind of coming of age quest fancy type thing. But I'd love to see a movie or TV series of that. Okay, book 7 then, a book character that we'd like as a friend. So I was thinking about like characters from books I'd like to kind of hang out with. And I think I would like to hang out with the detectives from the 87th Precinct series of books, which may not be a surprise to anyone who's watched my channel and knows how much I love that series. But I'd just like to hang out in the squad room of the 87th Precinct and watch them go about their days, like solving crimes, and kind of be able to chat to them and just hang out with them, drink coffee, eat donuts, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's my answer for that one. Okay, question 8 then. A place you want to visit because of a book you read. So I was thinking about this question and thinking about the fact that quite often when you think about places, it's not just books that make you think about those places, if you see what I mean. It's like movies and things like that as well. So I was thinking like maybe Tokyo or something like Tokyo or somewhere like that. I've read about quite a lot in books. But then I decided actually a place that I have only read about in books and don't know from movies. And that is the island in a book called The Summer Book by Tove Jansson. So Tove Jansson, most famous for writing them or creating the characters, the Moomins, but also wrote some adult books. And one of these is just a wonderful, wonderful book, The Summer Book, about this girl going and spending a summer with her grandmother on this island in, I guess, Sweden or Norway. I can't remember where Tove Jansson's from now. That's terrible. Where it is in Scandinavia that Tove Jansson's from. And this island just feels so wonderfully idyllic in the way that places are when you're a kid, just full of opportunity and places to explore and nature and all that wonderful stuff. So I'd love to go and chill out on that island. Okay, next question then. A non-fiction book you would recommend. So for this one, I think I have recommended this book on the channel before, but it really is fantastic and well worth reading. So the book is The Dictator's Handbook by Alistair Smith and Bruce Bueno de Mesquita. This is just a fantastic book about dictatorships and about how people become dictators. And once they are dictators, how they hold power. So it uses like real life case studies of people who've like staged military coups and things like that to take power in countries, and how they've then clung on to that power. But what it then does, which is brilliant, is then translate that into democracies and talks about how very similar systems of power and influence take place in democracies as well, and how democracies are often about once people get into power, about then trying to cling on to power by influencing certain groups, and how a very small group of people can actually determine the direction a country goes in politically. And this is something I find myself reflecting on this book often when I'm watching TV and seeing how politicians behave on TV, and cases when they do things that don't seem to quite make sense, when they make policy decisions that seem to be focused on like benefiting a very small group of people rather than the country as a whole. So yeah, it really is a fantastic book and one I heartily recommend. Okay, final question then. If you could hang out with an author all day, who would you pick and why? I think for me it's got to be Evan Hunter / Ed McBain, author of the 87th Precinct series of books. My favourite author, sadly died about 20 years ago. But just a great author, and I would just love to watch his daily routine. So he was someone who treated writing very much as a job. He would get up in the morning and go to his office and spend hours writing. And I'd love to just be able to observe that and be able to chat to him about how he created his characters, how he came up with his plots, which were fantastically intricate sometimes. So yeah, I'd love to spend a day with him. He was also supposed to be a great kind of storyteller in terms of over a few drinks in the evening, telling anecdotes and things like that. So I'd love to have dinner with him at the end of the day as well and hear some of his stories. So yes, those are my 10 answers to 10 random bookish questions. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what your answers to some of those questions might have been. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.